There
I
we go.
can't get Alex up.
So over to you, mate.
Thanks, Derek.
Oh, that's better.
I'll take it. Pete, see if you can send to me. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Alex. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, yeah, doing okay. In a bit of chaos. I've managed to just get my daughter to sleep, and no doubt she'll probably wake up screaming in a minute.
That's what two kids do to you, mate.
Yeah, it's all part of the fun and games of it. So you might have to bear with me for the first fly at least while I figure out where I am. But thank you all for joining me. It's been a long time coming. I've stayed in regular contact with Derek and really looking forward to tying a few flies for you all this evening. Um, please do shout out if you've got any questions through the demonstration. If there's anything that even if it's not a fly that I'm tying. If you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to try and field them and offer any help as I go. Um, I'm just going to tie a handful of flies that work well for me for different purposes. I'm going to start with a crippled dun March Brown, which is the fly that I favour in the early parts of the season, particularly for fishing on the River Usk. If I manage to get up and target the March Browns up there. So what I'm going to try and do is shuffle myself over onto my other camera. If someone could just let me know that the feed is coming through okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's perfect.
Brilliant.
Well, it
So
is for me anyway.
great. I try to zoom in enough. I can probably go in a bit closer if we need to.
No, that's fine.
What we've got here is a size 14 Partridge SLB2. So rather than the standard dry fly hook, it's one wire weight heavier, which I particularly like because you've got a bit more strength there. Um, oh, hang on. See if I can get you back there. There we are. So it's one wire weight heavier. Not so much for the dry fly because obviously that's more weight to hold up. But what it does do if particularly if you're encountering any big fish, is it gives you that extra strength in the hook. And then for a thread, try and get that right. We've got the Semperfly classic wax thread in a 12-0, and the color's just brown. So easy does it. And then to secure the thread, several wraps back, touching turns, and that gets everything locked in. And then we can nip out the tag and get on with forming the back. You'll notice that I started the thread that are about a quarter of the way back. That just helps me to get a better handle on the sizing of the fly when I get towards the end of the tying. But I'll take my thread all the way back to the end of the straight to the shank and where the bend is beginning. And at that point, I'm going to tie in my tail, which for that I'm using Coq de Leon. But if you don't have any Coq de Leon tailing, you can substitute that easily with a standard brown game hackle. The fibers will do the same thing, and I'll take a good pinch, 5 or 6 fibers, get them lined up, and then I'll tie them in. And lengthwise, I'm looking for about the length of the shank again on my fly. So, and to do that, pinch it against the hook take your thread up through your thumb and forefinger where you pinch, and that creates the tension for you to loop your thread down. Right, otherwise, if you do it under tension all the way, what it will do is sometimes push the tail fibers round the hook. So by taking that tension off, it means that we can pull the tension straight down on top of the shank, and then we're not getting that twist. It's anchoring it in, and then we can throw our securing turns. And because we're using a 12-0 thread, which is relatively thin, it will allow us to get 1 or 2 extra turns in than we would if we were, say, using an 8-0 thread. So it gives you that added security. And then to create a little bit of body shape, we'll wrap that forward, and then I'll actually double it back. And that will create that nice natural taper of the fly. Then we'll return our thread back to the start of the tail. And I'm a big fan of goose biots. They're a little bit fiddly to tie with, but the broader fiber of it I like for the segments of the fly, unlike a sort of stripped quill type. They give you nice open turns, but you also have the raised barbs on it, which not so important on a dry fly, but particularly on a nymph. It's another thing to capture pockets of air and bits of interest.
Such soft plastic,
So I've
balls, really soft plastic.
I've cut the
ball or felt it.
I've cut the fiber there, and I'm going to tie it in by the tip, and there will be a slight natural curve of the fiber, and I always look for that curve to be going up and away from the shank. And you only want to secure sort of 2 or 3 mil of that, so you've got quite a brittle bit of the fiber secured in, of the biot secured in. So you have to be careful with your first few turns. So I'm now returning that thread to the front of the shank, and I'm going to begin my turn. So I'll ease it forward. So you can use hackle pliers, but I tend to find personally with hackle pliers, I tend to break the biot. And I'll push it round just using my index finger, and that takes the pressure off that first turn. And ease it up and round, and then use that index finger again, and allow the natural properties of the biot to give you your segments of the body as you work it forward. And then on that last turn, I'll hold it with the index finger and begin to wrap my thread. There's only a very small tag end left. At this point, we can trim that off and really bind it down. And we've left ourselves a really nice portion there for a thorax area, which we now use this point to tie in our wing material, which is going to be CDC. And this is just classic duck CDC, but it comes from an Irish shop that I tend to buy my CDC from, and it gives you quite a good long feather. It's got really nice thick fibre. It's perfect for dry fly.
Is that the Irish charity shop type where you get a look at the board?
It's the Premier Angling Supplies in
Oh, right.
County
Okay.
Tipperary. So I used to stock up at the Irish Fly Fair. But I find if you call them up, I suddenly find myself ordering about €50 worth of CDC in bulk, and what looks like a sort of pillow turning up at your door when it arrives. Um, but this is natural grey. And I've taken three feathers, and what I'm going to do is pair them up tip to tip.
I can vouch for that, Alex. But they're out of stock at Premier Angling at the moment for now.
Oh, are they? Ah,
I'd order some beginning of the week.
well, hopefully now with a bit of shooting back in this time of year, hopefully they'll start stocking back up again. Because certainly value for money for the quality that you get, I've struggled to find anywhere that quite competes with them. Right. So I've got my three feathers there paired up, and I'll stroke all the fibers to try and get as many of those good fibers in as possible. And then I'll look to do the length of the body, but rather than a sort of standard done where you might tie that going forward, I'll actually tie it going back. I'll actually tie this going forward. Let my thread up, and I'll do that same pinch and lock, and then give myself a nice big open thorax area. And you'll see that stands nice and proud at the front. And then rather than cutting it flush, I'll actually cut it a little bit back to almost look like that sort of wing area bursting out, as if it's a crippled dun that's become crippled during the emerging stage and trapped on the water. And then I'll run just a standard red game hackle, just to build your wing and leg area, to offer you extra buoyancy. And it doesn't need to be a big hackle because your main wing is formed by that CDC. So you're really just looking for something to give you a little bit of extra buoyancy, an extra sighter, because for those that have fished rivers like the Usk, where the March Browns are, you're quite often faced by quite choppy water at times. So you want a fly that's going to be buoyant, but also that you're going to be able to see when the fish takes. And so I'm just stripping the fibers away at the lower end of the hackle, to present my area to tie in, and I'll tie it with the sort of back of the hackle, the inside of the hackle facing down towards the shank, and I like to push that against the shank and then bind it in with that thread. If you've ever had a hackle slip, what you can do is turn that tag end back on itself and offer up a couple of extra turns, and then it's really trapped in. Take out the bit that you don't need, and then find your hackle pliers. Trap the hackle on the end, and then ease it forward. I like to just disrupt the stem of that hackle just to help get those first turns to sit nicely, and then just wind in touching turns forward towards your CDC wing at the front, and then run your thread behind that hackle, trapping it in, and then take a couple of turns in front, and that will act as your sort of locking wedge. And you go in with the point of your scissors, clip that out, tighten everything down, and then I'll stroke everything back and put a couple of turns in front of the wing. I'll take my whip finish tool and just do the finishing touches, and that gives you a Crippled March Brown pattern. Sort of perfect for those early season trout outings. If you want, you can singe or clip some of those fibers underneath with the hackle, just to give you a slightly different profile on the water. But personally, I like to leave them because it gives you that extra purchase on top of the water. So if anyone has any questions about that, or want to know any details about it, now's a great time to step in.
Is that a new pattern you've just come up with, Alex? I thought your March Brown was slightly different than that.
No, I fished a couple of different March Brown patterns. So I do also like the jingler style, where you've got the full hackle then with the soft hackle in front. You just sometimes when you've got a really big hatch, you might find that fish are being a bit selective on one stage of the fly, or they just want a fly presented slightly differently. So it's good to have 2 or 3 patterns in your armory in those instances.
Yeah, no, I thought you did one without the legs and the red hackle. That was the bit which I was surprised on.
Okay. I probably I have done some with I know the one. Yes, I use that one a lot more for large dark olive, so a slightly smaller
Right, okay.
version with the CDC in the thorax.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, Pete, that was the perfect time. Anybody else before I sort of hop on to something different?
No, happy
Okay.
to-
It's fine.
Brilliant. I'll then move on to something a little bit faster sinking. So this time we're going to get the tungsten out and have a look at a fly that you could use for clear water grayling, which bear with me a second. My son wants to shout hello to everyone. Oh, thank you. Do you want to say hello? You have to say it loudly.
You all right, Billy?
There you go. And say thank you, Derek, for everything you've done. They can't quite see you, but
They can't see Billy, they do now.
right, there we go. Sorry, interruptions.
All right.
Yeah. So we're going to look at a fly for clear water grayling fishing. A really good one this time of year if it hadn't been raining so much. But also a fly that I've used elsewhere in Europe. And of course it does also work quite well for trout as well. So this time we're stepping things up to a size 14 wide gate jig hook. This particular one is the Partridge SLJ. And I particularly like this shape of hook because it gives you a really good hook hold on grayling. The wide gate seems to just have a better grab hold when you're hooking them. Particularly if you've got fish that are going to run downstream in the current, it gives you that extra shore hold. The bead, whether the red dots make any difference, I'm not sure how well you can pick that out. From where you are, I don't have hold that behind there. I'm not sure if you can see any of the red dots on there.
No.
I think it's a bit more of a gimmicky thing. I think the white bead is probably the deciding factor, but it's always nice to think that you've got something else giving you an extra benefit when targeting fish. Thread-wise, we're going to change. We're now going to move on to the Semperfli Nano Silk. This is in black, but rather than the 18.0, which is very popular, again, I'm just going to stick with the 12.0. For most nymphs and dry flies, 12.0 is about as thin as you need to go. It's only really once you start going to size 18 and up that you find the benefit of the 18.0 and even I think do they do a 20.0 or a 24.0, which are great for small flies, but not really necessary for flies like this, like a 14, a 12, 16. So I'll begin the thread, and this time tie it up against the bead and opening it out, and then trimming out my tag end, and then work that back. So the thing with the wide gate jig, you've got two ways you can tie. So you'll find that you've got a really short shank on it if you tie on the straight part of the shank, or you've then got the bend. And different patterns work in different ways. We will look at another pattern after this one. But for ones where they've got a standard nymph tail, I quite like to just tie on the straight shank. Whereas when I start looking at tags and hotspot ends, then I'll start to tie down the bend of the wide gape. But for this one, we're going to go back to our trusty Coq de Leon for the tail. As I said on the last one, again, a standard sort of cock hackle fiber will do the job just as well. But I do like the sort of mottled bar effect that you get on with the Coq de Leon. But again, probably like the red spots on the bead. Whether the fish actually notice is another thing.
I think the shininess of Leon makes a difference, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it could well do. So yeah, it's one of those. If you're not going to select it out of your box, it's not going to work. So if you put it in the box and it looks good, you're more likely to tie it on and catch a fish with it. So again, we're going to tie the tail in, looking at about the same length as the body. This time I'm taking into account the bead as well. And we'll pinch that down against the shank and slide that thread down. What you can find with the nano silk is it will always sit much nicer. It will give you a flatter base. So when you're securing materials in, you can do so much quicker. One of the downsides you can have with it is it's a little bit slippy. So you need to make sure that you're putting added pressure or added turns in just to really secure everything in place. And I'll wrap that all the way up to the bead, a couple of turns back on itself, and then we'll trim the tag ends out. And we're going to add in a rib at this stage. And here I've got just a standard copper wire in 0.2 mil. If you've got 0.1 or 0.3, they will do a similar job. 0.3 is probably a little bit too thick, but 0.1 and 0.2 are nice ribbing sizes. For that, I'm just gonna turn this over. So I've got a slotted bead on there because we're tying on a jig hook. So when I tie in my rib, I actually tuck the rib into the slot, and that gives you an extra anchor point when wrapping those first turns. And then whenever you're tying in any material, try not to let it twist round the hook as you're winding, because that will change the profile of your fly. Trying to hold it on one plane all the way. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. Obviously, if you're tying materials on top, it's going to give you an up-down profile. So if I'm tying shrimp patterns, I'll tend to tie in a lot of materials on top to build up that taller profile. Whereas if I'm doing more your standard nymphs, sort of clinger type, I'll try and tie my materials on the side of the shank to give you a broader profile. Again, whether the fish notice these, it's anybody's guess, but for me, it makes me happy with the fly when I'm picking it out of the box. And then for the body, we're going to go with a simple tan dubbing. This one is the Semperfly Scud dubbing, but anything in that kind of tan, pale pink would do a similar job. It's just looking for a pale light-bodied dubbing. But when combined with the black thread, when it gets wet, you get that darker core and then a lighter external area. Okay, give me a minute, that should come back. Yeah. So it'll give you a bit like the killer bug. It was always darker in the core and then paler on the outside, which when you look at a lot of nymphs, they have that degree of variability in the shades when they're swimming in the water. And the key with dubbing is to always start with a very small amount. Otherwise, if you start with your big clump of dubbing at the top, what you can find is you get a clump that doesn't actually take to the thread. Whereas if you start with a few strands, particularly with these long strand dubbings, you can get a securing anchor at the top and then build in the rest of the dubbing to it. And from that solid base, you can control the diameter of the dubbing as you're turning, which will allow you to control the diameter of your nymph as you're working up the body. So to really lock in those first few fibers, one turn over, and then you'll find that you can really tighten that dubbing down and begin working it forward. And as you go in touching turns, you just want to try and build that profile out a little bit. And then when you get to sort of the turn before you want to finish, you can start stripping away the dubbing that you no longer need. Pull that away, and then, like you did at the beginning, you're tightening the last few strands, and that will lock your dubbing off and give you a nice finish to the dubbed body. A few securing turns, and then we're going to work our rib forward. Nice open turns, and when you're ribbing a nymph like this, you want those segments just to gradually grow as you move towards the head of the fly. 2 locking turns behind, 2 in front, and then with wire, rather than cutting it, you just want to take your thumb and forefinger, and what you can't see out of the screen is I've got the other one on top, and you turn it like you're mixing a bowl, and it will break itself out. So rather than ruining your best pair of fly tying scissors, you just twist it out and let the thread do the cutting for you. And then for this particular fly, we're going to put in a CDC collar. And to do that, we're going to split the thread to create a dubbing loop and put a few fibers in that we like. So I'm coming back to my trusty big CDC, and then what you can do, you either have the Flash Mark Petitjon tools or some paper clip style ones. Trap your feather in, and that will allow you to cut your fibers away. So that presents you with a good bunch of CDC. And then whilst you have been doing that, what should have happened is your thread will have been automatically unwrapping itself, so it's at the flat end. And using a dubbing needle, you can split your thread, giving yourself two strands. If you struggle to split the thread, you can also do it with a dubbing loop bobber, and actually wind two strands round, and that's another really effective option. So now I'm going to take my CDC fibers, slide them in to the top, and just let that thread. That again. It's always harder when you've got a camera watching you.
Always away, isn't it? Do that again. Take our CDC in. Unpinch that there. At this point, before you tighten anything, you can either bunch it up, open it out, adjust it slightly. There are a little bit you can do. And then all we're going to do is spin the thread round and just wait for that thread to tighten up and bind all of those fibers in. So it's a really nice way of getting yourself a bushy dubbing style of dubbing, perfect for collards on nymphs. But you can also use it for straggly dry flies like sedges, cadets, and then wrap it in. When you get to it, like you're doing a hackle or dealing with any other butchery material, you want to guide it in the direction that you want it to naturally flow. So I want it to naturally flow backwards in a fly, like straggly legs, just going back in the current, tighten down, and then you can bunch it up. What you might find is you'll get a few strands that are too long. You can just pinch those out with your fingertips, and then you have your nice CDC collar. And then we're going to put a slightly flashy black dubbing in, just with a few UV strands and a few flashy strands in, just as a darker wing-like color at the front. And we don't want to bind that dubbing too tight. We just want it to secure in, because that will be scruffy at the front and begin to open out with the CDC to give you more legs and more profile. And then we'll get our trusty whip finish tool and use the bead just to guide those into place. And there we have a really good, as I say, really good grayling fly for clear water, but also an effective trap pattern. So that's just coming back, hopefully. Hang on, bear with me, I have to get up. There we are.
Perfect.
All right, have we got any questions on that one at all?
Have you got a name for that?
No, all good, perfect.
Just a Grayling Grub?
Yeah, you could put that down as a Grayling Grub. It doesn't have a name yet. Could be the
Jardine Grub.
yeah. It's yeah, maybe the Ludlow FDG Grayling Grub. Sort of moving on, I'd said that I'd talk about a slightly different way of using the wide gate jig. So now I've got a slightly bigger one. We were on the size 14 before. I've now gone up to the 12. I've got a 4mm slotted silver tungsten bead on. So this one really is for getting down to the bottom of the river. Now we're going to look at tying a fly with a tag in, but a slightly different way of doing tags. I'm sure many of you have done sort of single floss tags, but now we're going to look at combining two colors. So I'm going to use my 12-0 nano silk again. It's my fairly trusty nymph thread. Build that little thread base up and take our tag out. Run down, so we've gone past the straight path of the shank, and now we're going to run, I don't know, perhaps a third of the way down the bend there, and we're going to add in our first standard tag. So we've got orange floss. This one is the Semperfly Flora Bright Orange, but there's sort of Unifloss equivalents and plenty of others that do the same job. So I'll cut a strand, and then if you start doubling it over, because the strand isn't quite enough, and then double it over again, and then again, so you're essentially up to 8 strands now. And I've just got a small amount. We're going to tie that in, and with a tag, particularly when you've tied it like this, you're going to tie it in longer than you need to begin with. Secure that in place. Just ease those material back on top. When you're doing the malted strands, it's easy for them to get wrapped, and really bind them down. And to help with the profile of that fly, just going to wrap it forward, and then remove the stubborn ends. Yeah. Secure those down, and then with your loop at the end, sharpen scissors, just trim that down to the sides. And with a tag, in my view, they don't need to be huge. It's only for something to grab the fish's attention quickly.
And then we can take our dubbing needle and just push it in at the base and just open out the twists in the original floss, and that will give you a nice bushed out tag. Yeah. And then we're going to run our thread back down, nice and quickly. And we're going to add in our second part of the tag. This time we're using a long strand flashy dubbing, something like an angel wing, or this one is just the Semperfly sparkly dubbing, which comes in quite a long strand anyway. And you just want a handful of fibers, and you're looking to secure those down on top of your other tag. And what I particularly like when constructing a tag like this is firstly you have the color change of the two different tags, but because you're using two different materials, you've got the flash of the kind of angel wing, the long dubbing strands. It's just an extra thing to grab the fish's attention, because ultimately when we're using hot spots, we might be using them early in the morning or late in the evening when the light's low, or we might be using them in colored water situations. So a tag needs to do an important job of really stopping the fish and making it come for your fly. So it's worth having a few that are more garish than others. And with that sparkly tag, whilst I don't like having too straight a finish on it, so you can angle the scissors in a little bit, I keep that sparkly tag a little bit longer than the standard block color one. And it does seem to work quite well in colored water situations. And now we're going to take a silver wire rib. Again, this is a 0.2 mil silver wire. Take that off, and we've got the slotted bead on. So tuck it into the slot. Tuck it into the slot there, and then wind our thread back to the end of our body, making sure that it's really secured in and not going to wrap. And then we're going to build our body back. So in quite a lot of nymphs like this, I use a super fine standard black dubbing. So nothing to it at all. It's just like a dry fly black dubbing. And take a little bit of that. What I particularly like about the super fine dubbings is that you can really create quite a thin body, and that soft dubbing is really easy to work with. So you can build a body on a fly very quickly. So create your start and then build a bit of profile, so we're gaining the profile as we go forward. A bit more dubbing. So thing with a size 12 is it takes a lot more dubbing than the 14s. And when you're building a profile up to a 4mm tungsten bead, it's a lot different to the smaller 3.5s as well. Right, now we're going to take our wire, and just like we did on the previous fly, we're going to start creating segments that are growing ever so slightly as you progress forward up the fly. Bind it down a couple of turns in behind and a couple in front, and then ease it out of the fly there. And on the last fly, we looked at doing a CDC collar with the split thread. This time, the other way that I like to do it, particularly if I want less fibers, but more of the longer fibers at their full length, is that I'll prepare a CDC feather, much as I would a soft tackle for a spider. So splitting the fibers back and then tying it in by the tag. And because I'm hiding in with the bead, I'll tie with the tip forward. Get my locking turns in, bind that back, and trim the bit that I don't need out. Find those hackle pliers again. And then hackle that CDC feather round, and you'll see that those fibers really sit up pronouncedly, and you get a really good length of fiber. Looking for about, depends how you want your fly and the particular CDC feather you're using, but sort of 2.5 turns should be plenty. And then run your thread through the hackle, through the CDC, bind it down, couple in front, and that's ready to trim out the stem. Look to go in with just a small opening in your scissors just to clip the stem of that, and then you're just left with your CDC collar, and you can bind your thread down on top. And then for the thorax on this one, we're now just a little black sparkle dubbing. Peacock sparkle dubbing will do a similar job as well. It's just to add an extra element next to the solid black body, and bind that in. Again, you don't want it dubbed in too tight because you want some of those strands to kick out and sit with the CDC feathers. Put down, take our turns in front, and then run our whip finish in behind the bead. And there we have a fly using 2 tags to help generate a bit more interest from the fish in coloured water. Any questions on that one?
Name of it, Alex?
I've got it's a bit like a fruity violet, so shall we call it the I don't know, the fruity jig? I'm trying my best here, Derek.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Do you only ever use that, Alex, in coloured water?
For me, yes, because I've got flies that I kind of go to in clearer water anyway, but that but that's not to say it wouldn't work in clearer water at all. It's a bit like all of us. We've all got our favourites and our go-tos, and that's the situation that I tend to favour to use that one in.
No worries.
So I'm going to spring back to the surface of the water, just because I feel it's the right thing to do now. And a very simple dry fly, but one that served me really well, particularly on fish that are very fussy in the middle of bigger hatches. And it's a few ways that you can adapt it to make it more versatile. But I'm going to start with the original tying that I find works well. This time we've got a small hook. Well, this one's actually a 14, but I tie these all the way down to an 18, if not a 20 for some places. It's pulling your back. This is the Sprite buzzer hook. So code is S2100. And what I particularly like about this hook is a slightly straight shank at the front end before the curve. It's not like a shrimp hook or a grub hook where you've got that full curve all the way through. And then thread wise, it's really up to you how you go. You can either go down the nano silk where you're hiding it, or if you're worried or find that you're putting a bit more thread and it's more visible, then you might want to go for an olive thread, just more of a classic thread. And this is going to be a standard CDC shuttlecock, but there's a slight element of it that's important and that I find makes it work really well above other styles of shuttlecock that I've used. We're working our thread. Clip that off. And rather than tie the wing in first, I'm going to do the body. So take it a fair way back. With this particular pattern, I find that you don't always need to do a full length body. You can sometimes do a half length body, and it still worked very well. For the dubbing, this is a natural hair blend. So I prefer a natural dubbing rather than the sort of man-made dry fly dubbings, because you want that bushiness that you can only really get from a natural dubbing, sort of a bit of those guard heads coming through, just giving you something different in every one that you tie, and in my view that does make a difference. So we're taking a nice pinch of it, and we're binding down a very tight bit at the beginning, because we just want it to look like a thin body to begin with. Just gathering a few turns. You can even have them slightly open to begin with if you're trying to create a really tight taper, and then allowing that body to take shape somewhat as you get onto that straighter part of the shank. And then a bit like that first fly we started on, leaving a good portion, sort of a quarter of the fly open to fit your thorax in. And now you want to select your CDC feathers, but this time, rather than going for the big long feathers, trying to pick slightly smaller ones that have thinner stems on them. Particularly as you go down in fly size, you want less stem in the fly, as that chews up valuable body space. Typically, we'll go with 3 feathers. Actually, it's all up there, so we've got our bunch ready, stroking the fibers forward. And now I've always gone for the body length on top. And the thing that I find makes this fly so effective is by lengthening that up and almost going a body length and a half. Firstly, it's more visible when it's on the water, but also it's the fish seem to really hone in on this rather than something with a slightly smaller wing. And the only thing I can think is it must be closer to the natural, having that slightly bigger wing, or certainly appear closer to the natural than having a body length wing. So try and aim for going with a longer wing than perhaps you're used to doing. Pinching that in at the front. Sliding that in, making sure that you're happy with the position. Binding that back slightly. You can leave it flat at this point. Again, whenever I'm tying an emerger, I like to leave a little bump of CDC at the back there, just to still look like that wing bud bursting open, and then finishing the fly off with the same dubbing that we started on, just to hide that thorax work that we've done with the thread. And then what you can do is you'll CDC back with your thumb and create a little dam, and that will push everything up to give you that nice pronounced wing. And then in with the whip finish tool. Couple of securing turns, and out of habit, I always do a second just to really lock everything in place. There we have one of my sort of more effective flies during a big olive hatch.
Very nice. Alex, do you think the wing length,
Yeah.
my opinion was it catches the wind and movement more, so it actually moves more being slightly longer?
Yes, absolutely, it can. I think, and it's always a I think the wings do appear bigger. There was always that saying that when you see a fly on the wing, when you tie one on, to always go down at least one size, if not 2, from what you thought it was. And I think it might be the same for the fish when they see a fly wing above the water. The wing might actually look bigger
Magnification.
than the body size. So if you've got a smaller body with a bigger wing, you're giving the fish what they're seeing rather than what's necessarily actually there. But that's probably one for a greater mind than my own, I think.
Yeah, it just seems to flutter more on the water, I always think, with a taller wing.
Yes, yeah, completely. Hopefully that will come back.
I was actually on a river this year and I was watching, large dark olives coming down. And the ones which were sitting on the water like sailboats were just being refused.
Okay.
And they were only taking the ones which had a flutter or a little bit of movement.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. And absolutely. So I think if we can replicate that, and certainly, as I say, that slightly bigger wing does seem to
Yeah,
prove a difference.
totally agree with you. It looks nicer as well.
It does. It does. I think the key certainly with that is to fish a slightly longer tippet as well, because that will give you that movement without the drag taking over as quickly.
Yeah. Do you exaggerate your tail a little bit more if you're doing a bigger wing or not?
No, so like with this one, I don't have a tail in at all. I tend to find certainly when you look at a natural, lots of naturals have no tails or tails missing. I don't think that's a big trigger for fish. But all naturals that fly away have two wings, or four in the case of a stonefly.
Yeah.
So that's probably a bigger selling point to the trout is having the wings correct rather than the tails correct. But that's sort of a little snapshot on what I thought I could show you. And
That's
then I
lovely.
thought, I thought I'd open up the sort of next bit to any either tying methods or things that people have found difficult, and just see if I can help at all.
Well, for me, Alex, starting that off,
Yes.
with the CDC wing, I'm trying to explain what I mean. I find it very difficult to get what I want satisfaction as you've got the stem of the feather,
Yes.
and if I'd like to, I like say on an F fly
Yes.
where you've got the feather going rearward. I like to have the feather flat as
Okay.
as you would if it was your hand, rather than upright. Do you understand what I'm meaning?
Okay. I think so. So I think
I'm always dissatisfied with my CDC wings.
okay. So you'd much rather have a flatter wing going backwards than
Well, it's keeping it upright better.
okay.
If you've got the stem of the feather in parallel with the shank of the hook,
Yes.
fibers spread out to the sides rather than the fibers going upright.
Okay, I see. You're finding that it is spreading sideways rather than
Yeah.
keeping quite a narrow profile. So a lot of that might be down to I picked just a standard dry fly hook. So I'll do a simple F fly quickly, and we can look at winds going backwards.
And also, regards to tying them in, say you
Yes.
want to tie a bunch of four feathers. Of course, it all depends on the quality of the feather.
Absolutely.
But I find it's easier to tie two in at a time rather than the four together.
Okay. So that might be one of the reasons why it's spreading. I think also what can happen with the stem. So the stem is a hollow part of the feather, or the stems are hollow. So when you pull your thread down onto them, they'll quite often snap out and flare out, and that can obviously go sideways, which is not what you want to happen in this instance. So I'm just building up a little body here. I've just put a slightly caddis green back end on.
this as a spot. Quite often with F-lides, I'll have a red hot spot.
Yeah, fly makes a great caddis imitation, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it tips a lot of different boxes. Quite a rough bit of dubbing there. Tiny bit. Right. We've got our tail. So I think any problem that you'll have tying two in, and then a further two, it's when you're tying it in, if I turn it that way, when you're tying them in, you're creating bulk on top of the shank. And then when you're trying to add more on top, they're inevitably going to go one way or the other. So you're then going to start going sideways. So can you remind me why you didn't like tying four in together?
Yes, I can, because I found it a bit difficult to tie the bulk of them together.
Okay.
I've watched people tie them in one at a time.
Yes.
And made a nice job of it. Stroking back the rough stuff at the bottom.
Yes.
And so you're leaving a gap for a tying in point.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think one way is obviously either try tying them all in together. I think I'd very rarely go past three feathers personally. Just because once you're looking at four stems, that's a lot of bulk that you're trying to get in there. The other way of doing it, which is a little bit of a faff, but I'm going to try and do it quickly. It's say you've got a long feather, and the ones that work particularly well are the goose CDC, where they're almost twice as long as this. And you actually cut little feeds in the feather as you go down. Which the camera's is coming back on in a second. I'm just going to start doing that now.
That's quite a feather that just yelled up.
Yes, yeah, it is good, a good feather this done. So I think one way, either obviously you've got CDC already, but one way is looking to improve that. Just trying to get it back. One way of doing it is to look at getting a better CDC for the job that you want.
Is that a Pat Nolan feather you just held up from Premier Angling?
It is, yes.
I've got some of his dyed stuff, which is very good.
Yes, yeah, it is very good. I mean, it's just everything. Certainly, all the ones that I've used from him have been good quality. So what I've done here is, it's hard to see, but I've cut little chunks of stem.
Yeah.
And you get fibers, and then what you can do is pair them up. But it is a fiddly process for if you're doing a bigger fly. I tend to do this if I'm tying small flies where you don't want any stem in there at all. But what you can do is then just use the fiber, but tie it in so the stem's not involved at all.
Yes, I think I know what you mean.
So you brush everything back. So you can see the stems here, but they can move around because I'm only holding the fibers. Get the fly in position and strap the
So you've got no stem in that wing at all now, have you?
No stem at all. So you're just left with the good part, the buoyant part, and you don't have any of the flaring because you don't have that hollow stem in there, which is what's giving you the flare.
But I think sometimes you need the bulk. I was fishing the Amesbury just after mayfly time with a golden olive F fly.
Yes.
They were going mad for it. Anyway, I lost that fly, but I'd got another, but there wasn't so much CDC on it.
Okay.
He totally ignored that.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing because when you've obviously with less bulk in there, the fly's sitting differently on top of the water, so you're whilst it doesn't look any different, it can be the difference between your fly sitting on top of the surface or in the surface or marginally underneath, and if your fly is sat where the fish aren't wanting it, they're just going to leave it alone.
Well, I think it was that. I thought with the original fly from a distance, to me,
Yeah.
it looked like a mayfly.
Okay. Yeah.
The second one with not so much CDC on it, looked nothing at all like it. And I'd put it down to that. Might be wrong. I don't know. But
No, it could well be.
I do know there was less CDC on the second one, and it was totally ignored.
Sure.
So yeah, there we go. It's fishing, isn't it, for you?
Yeah, it keeps us thinking. Well, that's what keeps us coming back for more. But that could be one way of getting around it. And what you could always do by tying this way is once you've taken out your stems, because you haven't built up that bulk of stems in there, you could always then go in with another one, a covering one, to give you that draping feather over the top, depending on what shape that you want.
I always think with a coloured feather to give you a sighter so that you can see it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is a good time to put it in.
And I certainly think that what you've just showed us there would be very good if you're tying very small flies, like 18s, 20s.
Yes, absolutely. I mean that's the style that I would use for tying those ultra small flies. It's a technique that you might find helps get you your profile that you're after.
Are you buying selected feathers, Tony, or just a pack and mixed?
I'm buying bulk packs, but I have got some selected CDC from Renyards with colours, and colours I never thought of using. I wouldn't know what to use for, so I haven't done it yet. But I was thinking, well, that would make the last feather on the top be a sighter. Certainly, with my eyesight, it's difficult to pick things out. So,
and one of the things which I would make a suggestion, it might seem an OCD, is but if I'm doing a lot of seaweed wings, I'll go to a bulk pack and I'll grade them and put them together in other pots. And when I'm tying a wing, every one is almost identical. And then it makes it a lot easier tying 3 at a time.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah. It's a bit of a...
Sorry, Alex.
No, absolutely, Pete.
That's the time.
That's good advice. Absolutely. So, well, hopefully, Tony, that's given you a bit of food for thought.
It's give me an idea, certainly, with doing that V.
Yes.
Some people do that sort of V with a feather, don't they, when they're doing a beard tackle?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So I never thought of that. So for the wings, but yeah, I'll give that a bit of a go. I think.
Brilliant.
Smaller flies.
Excellent. Was there anybody else that maybe has a question that I can try and help with?
How to split J wings a bit smaller?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question, Pete. I've managed to not bring any J-wings in my pack here. That's a conscious effort.
God dear, have I had problems with those this week? So thick.
Yes. Yeah, not the easiest thing to work with.
Anyway, while we're on the CDC, Alex,
Yes.
do you treat your CDC when it's been fished and you've been lucky enough to have a fish on it and it's got a bit slimy and wet and beraggled?
Yes, so I've got Amadou, so I'll dry it off with the Amadou, and then I'll dress it then with a powder floatant, but I'll always use a powder floatant with a brush rather than a shaking pot. Because what that does is it separates the fibers out and gives you a full coverage of floatant rather than just an outside coating.
Right. Somebody said this, was it magic something? Was good for that?
Well, there's lots of different
Yeah.
brands. I use the Hunt's original one.
That's good stuff.
It's good. I mean, there's Frog, Fanny, Loon, but I think they're all more or less the same product. It's really just the brush and being able to separate those CDC fibers when you're drying them off that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So can I help anybody else out there?
Don't be scared to unmute yourselves and ask a question.
Oh, I've obviously covered everything perfectly, Derek. No, well, it's been a pleasure time for you all. I'm Derek. I'm glad we were able to do this, and I'd love to obviously pop along again and help sometime.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah. So I'm gonna switch me back to the other video so you can see that I'm a real person.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you very much indeed, mate. Fantastic stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.